Hello, I'm Jerry Hancock from Men in Balance, and today we have a special guest, Kendall Heath, who has worked in spiritual issues for a long time and is now in charge of the Lighthouse Spiritual Center, originally in Morrisville, but now I take it is moving around. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Anyway, welcome to the program, Susan. Kendall, thanks for being with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So why don't we just start by you sort of giving us a little bit of the history of Spiritual Lighthouse Center, where it's come from, where it's been, what your background is, and what you intend to do with all that.
Yeah, that's a big intro.
Yeah.
Well, so Lighthouse Spiritual Center opened up in Mooresville, North Carolina, 30 minutes above Charlotte, in July of 2017. And this was a dream that I'd had for, upwards of 20 years. I understood that I would start some type of wellness center, some type of spiritual center, but I didn't really know when and where and what the circumstances would be that would lead me there. So I started this spiritual journey when I was about, I would say some point in high school, but most specifically around 19 at Appalachian State. And kind of really got into it with a world religions class there, and didn't do a whole lot with it. Went on and kind of lived my life and made all the normal mistakes you make out in the world, and didn't really come into understanding that that this would be my primary work in my life until I was probably in my late 30s. I had joined a spiritual community in Cornelius, North Carolina, that was kind of like a progressive Christian community. And I really liked that model. It was a very intimate model. The female minister there, in some ways, I kind of watched her, and I really learned a lot by watching her and seeing how that was set up. And this group invited me to a festival called Wild Goose, a progressive Christian festival that happens in Hot Springs, North Carolina every summer. And, I was on the fence about, kind of what I thought about, I wasn't totally dedicated to Christianity in particular, but had been studying this my whole life, and went to the Wild Goose Festival, and it just reawoken this calling inside me. I literally heard sort of almost like a message come to me when I was there that felt like it was coming just directly from above. And it said, you are to start a different type of church. And I kind of looked around. My husband was beside me, and I kind of did that thing like, are you talking to me? I was kind of in denial a little bit. And I really was hearing, you need to go back to school, and this is what you're supposed to do. The irony of that is that I came from my extended family on my mother's side is a lot of Southern Baptist preachers. And you couldn't have paid me $1 million to think that I was ever going to walk any kind of ministry path. I had been pretty rebellious with all of those things when I was younger. But I saw at this festival that there was a lot of conversation about things that were far beyond what I grew up hearing about. And it gave me some type of permission to move forward. So I went into seminary and eventually found that interfaith was my path. Interspiritual and interfaith seminary was my path. Took a little bit of trial and error to come to that point. But once I understood that, I had met somebody in the community who I kind of just enrolled in this idea. And I had gone to a business training in Asheville, North Carolina. At the time, I had an at-home marketing company. I was doing a lot of social media marketing. And I had gone to a business training that was like a 3-day retreat. And I was sort of looking around the room and watching. There's maybe about 300 people there, mostly women. And I was watching these exercises we were going through to understand how to run a business. And, everybody around me was struggling a lot, and it just really came natural to me. I really felt like I understood myself truly as being capable of being an entrepreneur, and even more so in the spiritual industry. So I left there, and I approached this friend that I had made, and I said, I'm going to do this thing that I've had in my mind for 20 years. And are you on board or are you not? Because I've kind of got to do it. I mean, it's kind of like do it or die type of thing. And then, we got down to saying yes. And then after saying yes, we thought, well, maybe a year from now we'll find a building and it'll all work out. But the universe had different plans, and we got on Craigslist, and within 60 days of saying yes, we found ourselves inside of a 120-year-old refurbished farmhouse that I had seen in my mind. I had seen a vision of this exact place when I was 19 years old. This exact house, big white house, wraparound porch, and just everything was affirmed. We got in the building, and we didn't really have any reason why the landlord of this commercial property would give us an opportunity. But again, the universe had other plans there as well. So we kind of burnt the midnight oil and created this concept from the ground up, and didn't really have any mentors, anybody to look to how to do such a thing. But I think what I find out is it kind of didn't matter. I mean, that has been part of my assignment. So fast forward almost 4 years, 3.5 years almost. And Lighthouse just became this thriving spiritual community. I had a certain mission about, what a spiritual community meant, and we got busy doing that. And we didn't think we weren't sure who would show up to the party, if anybody. And we certainly were afraid we might get run out of town, because we're talking about spirituality as opposed to a specific religion. But that didn't happen. People came out of the woodwork to be a part of that. And even though we're going virtual now, which is part of the times of COVID, our building has been sold. And I feel kind of another calling related to this same thing unfolding still in a different way. We just are keeping on going with the mission. So I think that's the easiest way to tell you how we got from there to here.
Yeah. So right now you're doing a worship service on Facebook on Sundays, is that right?
Yes. Yeah. Every Sunday on the Lighthouse Spiritual Center Facebook page from 11 to noon Eastern Standard Time.
Yeah. And so any particular direction of that or topics that you cover, or is it pretty wide open, or what do you do?
Well, I think that everything that we do is about how you have an accountable spirituality, how you have a spirituality that helps you live life here, now, in this body, with this particular set of troubles that you have. And a lot of it is looking at consciousness and how we understand, our minds, and how we can become more intentional about that. And we pull from all the traditions. So we're really learning about what has been taught over time, how we kind of piece that together. But, I'm really a firm believer that it's about not trying to take kind of these spiritual bypass routes or escape into a place where we're kind of disassociating from our responsibility in the whole thing, which is that we have to stay engaged in our healing, and we have to deal with our shadow stuff that comes up, and we've got to really get in a true relationship with the God of our understanding. So we just try to speak to how do you live here and in these bodies and these families with these difficult relationships and all the different facets of how, we're so flawfully and also perfectly human. How do we do that? So we just explore all of those opportunities together.
So I've heard you talk about before, you were sort of pleasantly surprised that men showed up for this interest in spirituality. And, that's a great sign, but tell me what your experience has been with that and what you've learned.
Well, you open a building, we always say that women tend to be the spiritual compass of a house. Women tend to go first. Women have a more developed language for spirituality a lot of the time, and for healing, because they have more circles where it's natural to talk about these things. We thought that we would just be all women, and it turns out that Lighthouse, probably became maybe 30% men. It was about probably the demographics. But the men, I find that men came to Lighthouse because it was a place where they could come and be present with their shame, be present with the things that they're not normally allowed to talk about. We have a dialoguing church, which means that everybody in the building is considered to be a minister in theory. I mean, we're all living here, we're all evolving. So everybody has a voice in the conversation. And men just found ways to safely tell their stories, to be able to let go of some of that masculine that was unhealthy and not serving them. I think Lighthouse by its very nature is kind of feminine, so there's a nurturing quality to that, but also men finding new ways that they want to be together as men. We always wanted to provide safety for that, because I think that we're at a deficit for safe spaces for that, and safety has to be a part of spiritual community. So I think that the safety was part of that for sure. And so they created a men's group. That men's group is on hiatus at the moment, but as we explore how we're going to do this virtually, we'll be back up with that. But you have a lot of men who are struggling through relationship things, or struggling with addiction, or struggling with their past in some way, or struggling with what success means, or how to be a parent, or all those things. And for men to be able to mentor men and not have to prescribe to a certain religion in order to do that, and have that neutrality there, I think is powerful.
Yeah, so anything in particular you've observed through this interaction with men? I mean, I'll give you something that I've observed, and maybe you can tell me if it follows with you.
Yeah.
In the survey that we did on Men in Balance, we got some surprising results. One of them was that men said sometimes they feel like in church they're going through the motions, and that they don't feel like they're the spiritual leader in their household, and that their spiritual life is sort of dry, and they don't know how to fix that. So I'm wondering if you've run into some of that same stuff.
I think I've run into all the same stuff, but I think that if men give themselves time to show up, just keep showing up, that somehow something finally touches into the heart, or they finally experience a safety, or they finally feel like they can let a guard down. And in that atmosphere, kind of miraculous things can happen, and of course the tendency of all people and men is to kind of close up after the session's over, like get your guard back up and get back out into the world. But it was always important to me that we have consistency, there's stability, that every Sunday you know what to expect, where the coffee is, where your chair is going to be, and you knew we were going to be there, because that consistency sometimes is what creates the safety. So, I think I've seen everything that you've seen, and I'm certainly no expert, and I still look at men sideways, including the ones in my own family. So,
Well, there's no explaining them. that much I've learned, yeah. Well, but I do find that men need sort of paint by numbers instruction. You said they need to just keep showing up. What does that mean to you?
I think that literally putting your pants on and arriving into the building. I mean, that's, I think, 90% of the battle, and then you find things that you didn't know you were going to find. It's kind of like, if you'll just show up, by default, some of that control you're not going to be able to maintain it. And then there's this beautiful opportunity that happens. I was surprised that men trusted me as a female minister. And I think in some cases, men are actually needing that type of leadership or that type of partnership in some way, in a way where it's not at risk of becoming something else. It just is what it is, and I don't really know, because I'm not a paint by numbers person. I can be pretty kind of take everybody way down into the deep end pretty quickly. So you'd probably have to ask the men who've been in the room why the hell they kept coming.
Yeah. Well, another thing that's been sort of intriguing to me is that I was told when I started Men in Balance that you'll have a hard time getting men to talk. That is not the issue. If you get them in the room, they will talk. My problem was getting them in the room. And so, men are sort of naturally skeptical about group activities anyway, especially if they're going to be called on to speak and are, singled out in some way or whatever. So I'm wondering, have you experienced that? And, for me, I've been fine with it, because they will speak. And if you get them in the same room where they know that each one has the same problems. They just now it's okay to talk about them.
Yeah, I mean, I think also when you finally find an environment where, inside each of us is a lot of feminine and a lot of masculine at various degrees. And I have a lot of masculine in me as well as feminine. So really at the end of the day, you're really talking about an honesty between two human beings. You're talking about some type of craving for that honesty and that candidness. I've always laid everything out on the table. And I think that when you do that, people respect that. Something resonates heart to heart, human being to human being. So we take all the pomp and all the kind of BS off of it, and we just go right down into the middle. And I think at the middle, it's safer for men and women. You're really then at the heart of the thing. So there's just no expectations. We take all the expectations off. We have people in our community who are recovering from heroin abuse. We have people in our community that are active addicts. We have people in our community that have porn addictions and sex addictions that they can't break or that came back into their life. We have people in our community who lost all, as far as males, who lost all confidence with themselves as they got out in the world, and maybe they went through relationships that failed. We have people that are trying to figure out how to take all that angst and aggression and kind of the more dominant masculine qualities that might negatively impact their families and their kids, and how to kind of get more conscious about those things. And and we have gay men in our community, and it's just this thing of like, we're all human beings, and there is no spiritual place that we all should be arriving at. It's like, just come as you are type of thing. And I think that is helpful in this setting. And honestly, again, I don't know. I mean, maybe sometimes, I don't know what drives the men in. All I know to do is to just show up every day and be as honest as I can be.
Yeah, that's good. Well, in terms of the work you've done, if you were to just give some general advice to people who are on sort of a spiritual search and don't know where to turn next, what would you suggest to them?
I think that it's important to talk to somebody who does spiritual mentorship and has some type of track record of doing that well. A lot of people don't know that there is a life outside of their religion. They're like, in other words, all they've ever heard about is Christianity, or all they've ever heard about is Judaism, or wherever you came from. And if you understand there is such a thing as interfaith, interspiritual work, and what that means is that we're going to allow you to be wherever you are, and we're not going to be kind of pushing any type of conversion or agenda here, and we're just going to hold the space for you to discover this on your own terms, then I think that's a good place to start. I mean, obviously, sometimes the reasons why people don't do things is because they have to subscribe to something that they don't fully resonate with, but they can't find another option. I've heard that complaint before about AA, and it's unfortunate because I see the value in those types of programs, and I see that you can kind of take what you need and leave the rest, but some people don't feel that way. So I think to just find good common neutral ground where you can begin exploring and find out, where you are on the path is important. Somebody like me who has an ability to walk you through that, a spiritual counselor may be able to do that. Somebody who specializes in spiritual direction may be able to do that.
Yeah, I will say it's not always your pastor. Sometimes pastors are not the best to take you in that direction because they're already locked into a certain point of view, and it doesn't help. So.
That's right. Sometimes it's the patriarch of your family, like a Jerry Hancock. Sometimes it's grandpa. Sometimes, we just don't know. Sometimes it's the guy next to you at the, sitting on the bar stool. But truly, I think that somebody who really has cultivated the ability to hold space for people properly in a way where that person is allowed to touch into their own intuition, their own deeper knowing, and also get a little bit of direction is so helpful.
Yeah. Well, Kendall, our time is up. I do appreciate so much your giving this time to us and the work that you're doing. I feel like we're partners in the same effort, so that's very helpful to have you on board.
Thank
So
you.
Kendall Heath from the Lighthouse Spiritual Center, thanks for being with us. I'm Jerry Hancock from Men in Balance.